like, what would you tell your younger self? And just be like, just chill out. Like, it's going to be okay. But boy, it sure didn't feel like it was okay at the time,
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Welcome to today's chat. Amy is a rare human. She is such a kind and uplifting spirit with huge compassion and empathy. It's a real treat to hear her stories of the challenges in her life and how with her incredible outlook, she finds so many great learnings and positives. Amy really has that glass full mentality. We could all do with a bit of the Amy outlook. Anyway, I love this chat and her, and I know you will too, so let's get into it and officially introduce today's guest. Amy Landecker is an actor, director, producer, and writer. You might recognize her from her many roles, such as Your Honor, MINX, Transparent, I Love My Dad, GASLIT, BEATRIZ at Dinner, A Serious Man, SHITHOUSE, The Premise, 3 Months, Dad in Real Life, A Kid Like Jake, Chivalry, Mad Men, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Louie, and Bombshell, plus so much more. She's also a voiceover artist and has appeared in a number of productions, such as She-Ra and the Princess of Power, Trollhunters, Batman The Long Halloween, and even worked as Julia Roberts' voice double, plus more. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, such as getting her big break later in life, the highs after the lows, making big shifts and getting sober, rejection, self-esteem and confidence, playing a Tomb Raider model, finding happiness, and almost being a sports broadcaster. Also, before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I find it adds a new element and dynamic to these chats. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. Yes, I'd love you to tell me about Tomb Raider and printers.
Okay. Yes. Yep. I actually consider that a huge success. You want me to start with this?
Yes, I would love to.
This is not a fail in any way. This is a perfect story about like relativity.
Okay.
Because at the time that I got this job, this was an incredibly great job. Because I was so broke. I was working as a barista at Starbucks. I was an intern at Steppenwolf Theater. I was like trying to get my acting career going. And in Chicago, one of the ways that you could make real money at the time, I think it was $5,000 for the week, which for me was like a lot of money at the time, was to do these trade shows. So there's a place called, which is like, these huge corporate productions where they are usually mimicking something in pop culture and using it to sell some sort of item. So
I didn't know that.
there's a really famous exhibition place in Chicago called McCormick Place. And it's like this massive exhibition where like there's car shows and trade shows and, a Christmas Carol, or Nutcracker and Christmas, like it has theaters and huge like trade show floors. And I was hired to sell Hewlett-Packard printers. And the way I was going to sell them, I was going to do a presentation, and it would be like every hour, like a rotating presentation. So you're in like a huge trade show, like you would be in Vegas or something, but this is in Chicago, and they're just like business people mulling around, going to like booth to booth, and you try to make your booth like as exciting as possible to get people to come. And I was hired as as an actor to give a presentation on printers, dressed like Laura Croft from Tomb Raider. So I had like leather stiletto boots and like some tight black outfit, and they had made, I thought it was really like the coolest job ever, because they had made a sort of a comic book like handout for the printers with me,
Oh,
like a comic version of me. And I wish I had one of these. I don't.
that's so
And they made
cool.
like a little stop action, like badly produced animated movie of me. And that was my big, you know, I also got to do Scully from, I think it's Scully from X-Files, in another like industrial for some other company, where I got to like be on a plane and be like a spy. So I always felt like those were the closest I was ever going to get at that point in my life. There was no sense that I would ever be out here in Hollywood and ever do anything that even touched that kind of stuff. I actually did end up later like doing a movie called I forget even what it was called. It wasn't, anyway, I shouldn't say it wasn't that good, but Hunter's Prayer in London, where I played a spy. But it was funny because I remember at the time that was like, it felt really exciting. I was like, there's a comic book about me and they're paying me $5,000. But
Amazing.
really, I was sort of like a low rent, you know, car model. And I basically had a bunch of businessmen asking me out to dinner. So that, married businessmen. But that's that's yeah, no, I did not say yes.
No, I mean, do you have a script of thank you for your interest? I am here just to sell the printers. Have you heard about this new deal?
I think that they want you to be as close to saying they didn't say that, but it's almost like you were like, oh, this is part of the whole deal. It's like these guys just walk around and you're supposed to be like some quote unquote hot girl that you talk them up and then they buy your printer. Yes, it was a compliment, certainly.
Do you ever watch The Simpsons? If you don't,
a little bit, yeah.
There's this bit I haven't seen for
though.
ages, where there's this attractive woman selling this really new car, and everyone would say to the lady, "Do you come with the car?" And she'd do the same giggle. I just found it so funny, even as I'm an 8-year-old.
Oh, that's funny. Like that's her thing. It's
yeah,
just
like oh you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, women have definitely perfected that through the ages.
No doubt. But I'm sure that, so you're saying it was a very exciting moment in your career. You were working at Starbucks. I think you also mentioned that you were working in theater, and I don't know if the timeline, you were running your own theater as well.
I had it. Well, I will say I sort of muscled my way into my sister's theater company. So my sister and her friends went to the New School of Social Research. And when they came home from New York, one of this group, her parents owned a building in downtown Chicago, and there was a club called the China Club, and they said that they would give Shannon Steppen and my sister and this girl Allie Gordon the space, and Ian Belknap. So it was 4 kids from New York, from New School, who they came to Chicago to start this theater company in this loft space that was free to us above this nightclub, but you could hear the club like boom,
really?
boom, boom, like
That's
during your plays, but it was totally free. So it was like we could do whatever we wanted. And I wasn't originally a part of that company. They asked me to come be a part of Lynn Seifert's play Coyote Ugly. And I kind of realized that I guess I went to college not really thinking I was going to pursue acting as a career. I thought maybe I'd go into like sports broadcasting, because it had been a thing for women to start doing that a little bit. And I really loved sports. And my dad was a disc jockey in Chicago. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do that. And then my sister, because my sister and her friends started this company, and I got an internship and stuff because my friend's mom was on the board. It was all just like nepotism.
Oh, the
basically.
universe is working for you. Yeah.
Yes, it was working for me. It kind of just like threw me into something I wasn't really planning. And I did this play, and for whatever reason, the reviews I got were just so great. And so then Anna Shapiro, a director of Steppenwolf, asked me to do a show there. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, but Pillar was like a place where we could like put on shows, and I would direct shows and be in shows, and it was really fun. I mean, it was a kind of an, crazy group of young people being messy in many ways, but it was also like really creative. And I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drive to Starbucks, do like a 5 a.m. to 11 o'clock shift. Then I go to Steppenwolf in the afternoon and do my internship. And then I go to the theater at night. And I was always like,
Wow.
only when you're 21
Yeah.
or 22 can you
I
do
couldn't
something
do
like
that.
that. No,
No.
it was insane. I mean, it was absolutely insane, but it was fun.
Were you running on adrenaline?
Yeah, running on adrenaline. I don't know, just crazy. I just think I was insane.
I find it so interesting that you're doing all of these things, and you briefly mentioned that you didn't think you would get there, meaning like Hollywood. Was Hollywood on your mind, or what was the?
It was always on my mind and never. I feel like I'm like the anti-secret. Have you heard of The Secret, where it's like, if you believe it, you manifest it?
Yep.
I was like, it's never going to happen. So it was sort of, I've always thought too, like the Jewish part of me is like the anti-secret, like the worst things are going to happen. And I've always had really lovely things happen, and knock on wood. But it was like, there was it was always on my mind. I think I was always like insanely like kind of star fucky ambitious youngster. Like I wanted to be famous for sure. But I never thought I had a path to that. I mean, I was like, I was a very like, there's a debate about what I was like in high school. I'll tell you that. So some people are like, you were not I was popular, but I was not. I will just say there's like a picture of me from prom that somebody like has been carrying around on their phone to show people as like a joke, because that's how bad I looked. You know what I mean? Like I went through an awkward phase, and my best friend in high school was this actress now named Anne H., who I don't know if you know her work, but she's a big deal over here, or was for a while, and had a very big career. And she was a model in high school, and I was sort of the chubster, and we did all the plays in high school, and I was, Mrs. Anthropus in The Skin of Our Teeth, and she was Sabina. Those characters are like, the Mrs. Anthropus is the unattractive older wife, and Sabina is the hot maid, and then we did like Beauty and the Beast, and I was like the ugly. Oh, we did, yeah. I was the evil ugly sister in something, and she was the beauty. Whatever. It was just like every play. Anne was the beauty, and my boyfriend at the time, who was really, really, really mean to me, like deeply cruel, dumped me for her. And so it was like, I didn't have any self-esteem coming out of high school. Like there was no sense, we had an agent come to the play and pick Anne. I still to this day kind of can't believe in any way, shape, or form that I ended up here with making a living doing this. It doesn't compute to the person who was like epically failing in high school, like epically failing. And, I was also like abusing alcohol at the time, just, sleeping with strangers, drinking myself to blackouts, hating myself, hating everything. And goes on to she got a soap opera the day of prom. And I'm like, I'm a total loser. And then like, 20 years later, I'm at like an Emmy party with her, and I'm just like, life is so bizarre. If I could tell like everyone, like, what would you tell your younger self? I'd just be like, just chill out. Like, it's going to be okay. But boy, it sure didn't feel like it was okay at the time, but no. So I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be an actress. Like that was not something I even thought. I just didn't think I had the looks for it. I guess that was the main thing, because I saw who got picked. Anne got picked. She left. She got the agent. She left. And I, went to college. I was going to try to be a broadcaster, but my acting teacher, I took like a freshman acting class, and he said, you really need to do the acting program. And I still wasn't planning on doing that for a living. And even when I went to Steppenwolf, the plan was, okay, maybe I'll be a director. It was never like I will be on camera or on stage. So
we're going to break that down, because that is amazing. And I like how everyone can relate to that, because everyone's had like that weird childhood, or have had issues or with self-esteem and confidence. And it's beautiful that you bring it up and you summarize it so nicely. But also with that your model arch nemesis, whatever we want to call it.
Yes.
You never played Tomb Raider, so you couldn't have been that good. And
she did play opposite Harrison Ford in an action movie that made over $100 million.
Yeah, well, I like Tomb Raider, and she wasn't in a comic book. That's my dream. So maybe I can be the next
Okay,
Tomb
good.
Raider.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right.
And also, she was probably like, I have no idea, but she was probably jealous of you on some level. Like, no one would go through all of that effort. Yeah, she would. Why would someone target you?
She didn't target me. She wasn't, that's the weird, she was my best friend. She wasn't my nemesis.
Oh, I thought she had the photo of you that was showing everyone.
No. She's not the one. Oh, sorry. I'm so glad we clarified that. Hell no. No, I don't even know if Anne thinks about me, but no. She was my best friend. And that's what made it even harder is I was so envious of my best friend. I mean, I just wanted to be her so badly. And no, the person who kept the picture was actually just some random dude who like texted it to me when I got transparent, was like, check you and Elliot at prom, which was, I mean, here's the great story of that I was gonna, wait, hold on one second. I'm gonna get my kid to take these dogs for a walk. So, okay, so wait till you hear this story. And I'm turning this into a movie at some point. I don't know how it ends or how it goes, but this is going to be a movie. I've written my first movie too, which is I'm supposedly making. I can't really officially say that, but based on
that's
like
so exciting. Okay,
trauma turned good. So that's my. So this is going to be something about that. I don't know what it is, but basically, I was in love with this guy. He was my first boyfriend, and he dumped me for Anne, and they went to prom.
Can I just stop you there? Sorry.
Why would my
Isn't
best
that
friend go
really
with-
weird that he went for your best friend? Isn't that like an unwritten rule? You can't do that.
Oh, he was evil, first of all.
But also,
he will remain nameless. Although he's not evil, sure, I'm sure he's not now, but he was like the classic bully in high school. And he, I brought Anne with us, you know, when you're like in high school and I didn't know how to behave. So I brought Anne with us all the time. So it's not surprising. I mean, some people might say it was weird that Anne went out with him. Whatever, we're in high school.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't remember, it's just not a good time. So,
yeah. Gotcha.
So I was obsessed with both of them. I honestly, and she ended up coming out as like bi and dated Ellen DeGeneres. It was a big deal here in the States. Like it was this massively explosive story. And everyone was like, oh, is she just dating Ellen to get, I was like, no, I believed she was bi. I always believed she was bi. Cause I was like, I was very drawn to her. She's a very dynamic, I'm not bi, but I've had crushes on anyway. What am I talking about? I'm going off on a tangent. Anyway, back to this. So I get asked to prom by a friend of Paul's, and I say yes just because I want to be. It's junior year and they are seniors. So Paul and me and Anne are juniors and they're seniors. So Anne's been asked by Paul. I want to be around, right? I want to be included somehow in this group because I'm an obsessive weirdo stalker kind of high schooler, and so I go to prom with Elliot and I'm totally wasted and high and who knows what else on the balcony of this like big downtown Chicago hotel. I think we were like, I don't remember where we were, but I've got my I'm sitting on the balcony looking down at all of them dancing, and Anne and Paul are like, on top of each other the way we'd slow dance back in the day. I don't know if kids still do that, but we were like, basically having sex with each other. And I'm like weeping, and I think I fall asleep. I pass out on the balcony.
Whoa. And
so a couple weeks later, Chicago Magazine comes out with a cover story about private school proms because they're so not like normal proms. Everybody dresses, everyone's rich, everyone acts cool, everyone's this, everyone's that. And the whole story was built around Barbie and Ken, the perfect couple, at the center of this prom, and it was Paul and Anne.
No way. How does that make the news, and how did they get in the news? That is wild.
Because they were that good looking.
Wow.
She was wearing a purple leather mini dress, to a prom, right? This was the 90s, late 80s. So she's also stunning, and he's blonde, and I'm the chubster up in the balcony weeping. That just sort of encapsulates what high school felt like to me. And the fact that I would end up anywhere near the circles of Anne later in life, like being cast as someone who might be considered. I remember when I got cast on Fox as like Dylan McDermott's like love interest. I was like the mom to some girl, but like the hot mom. And I was like, I don't even like Fox is cast me as a hot person. Like it still to this day doesn't. People like whenever they tell me I'm attractive in any way, I cannot fully register that because that's just not, I think what you are as a kid stays with you. So I just like I don't process that, but I am aware that I'm like, that I have a successful career and that I've seen her at business things that I like at the, we ran into each other at, the Toronto Film Festival. And, when there's like these big Hollywood Emmy parties, like it's just, I've run into her through the years and it's just so bizarre to me that someone that I was that tortured by is now just kind of, I'm sort of where she ended up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's a nice turnaround. And you were saying that would this whole story be potentially turned into a movie?
Yeah, I want to do some kind of like, so I just went back to my 35-year high school reunion. So I'm 52. So it's been quite a few years.
Very cool. 35.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I went to a really small private school in Chicago called Francis Parker. So we really only had like 60 kids in our graduating class.
That's the same as me, basically.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jewish school.
And
I know you
very
didn't go to
Jewish.
Jewish school.
Yeah. Yeah. Very Jewish.
Yeah.
And so I went back and I just had this idea of like, because everyone's like, oh, are you going to go back and like, you're like, doing so great and you're married to Bradley Whitford and life's so great. I'm like, no, it's not that kind of school. Like it's a weird school where kind of everybody's still doing great. And so you can't really totally feel like they're
really?
like
That's so
political people. Yeah. They're very privileged people. So people look good. They have good jobs. They're privileged, right? It's like a perfect example of what privilege gives you, which is like great health care and enough Botox if you want it or whatever the hell. So like, and a personal trainer. So it's not like a normal thing where you walk in and you're like,
couldn't flaunt it.
But yeah. And I was like, and everyone's always like, is Anne going to be there? Anne's never come to one of those reunions. But I just had this thought about going that there is, I think, something relatable. And I think it's actually maybe not that uncommon that your nemesis is your best friend, right? Like that kind of dynamic in relationships, particularly sort of classic female relationships where you're kind of like competitive. And like I said, I don't think she felt particularly competitive with me, but I would have done it cinematically from the perspective of like, and I'm not sure, I might do it in like a comedic horror genre. I don't even know how I want it to be. It's a new idea, but I definitely have this like, this happened to me with another thing I just finished where it took me like a decade, but I start to have the idea and I'm like, there's a movie in here. There's something about me, and I don't know if it's that I go back and try to murder her or she goes back and tries to murder me. And then we heal. There's got to be like a healing. Like, I don't want anyone, I think maybe then we both go to kill the guy. And like, like there's something, I don't want it to be, I want it to be like, there was a movie called Swimming with Sharks where this boss he's like super abusive. It was actually Kevin Spacey, but he's like, plays like a producer, Hollywood producer type who's evil. And his assistant finally like, tries to murder him. He like tortures him. He ties him up in a chair. And it's this sort of like comedic social commentary about evil bosses that's slightly horrific too, but it's like a bunch of different things. And tonally, I was like, this would be sort of like that where you have a plan, but then you realize like the plan's not really going to heal you. Like you gotta like heal yourself in some way. So either it's like my character matches her job for job and whatever that is in the movie wouldn't be acting and be something else. And then maybe that the Anna character still outdoes her and it just breaks her because she spent her whole life trying to like compete and prove that she can change. Like she gets, plastic surgery and she like loses weight and she's like, I'm going to be something that I wasn't. And then she still can't win. So it like snaps and she becomes like psychotic and decides that she's going to go back to the high school reunion and murder her best friend because she's just like over it. I think that's what it is.
I think, it is very relatable. I've written down a few points because, we all have that aspects of like childhood. Two things. One, make it a marketing firm. And I think based on what you said, it's more interesting. Look at me giving you advice.
I know, I love it. And I'll always remember it with an Australian accent. A marketing firm.
Marketing.
Yes.
I can't even, that was like sort of British. Marketing.
No.
And it could be interesting that she kills you. I'm writing like 7
Yes.
screenplays at the moment, so I'm super enthusiastic.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I've been thinking about her killing me, right? Something happens where like she cannot handle losing her stature or something as like the great popular one.
And I like the healing aspect of you guys working together at the end.
Yes. And then we're like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's go get the guy.
I like it.
And then I still think even the guy we don't end up killing because he's like a pathetic, like we go to kill him and he has lost all of his luster.
Just like crying and weeping and like just really ugly.
He's like a weathered, you know, like pathetic, sad, lonely. I don't know.
Imagine George Costanza when he gets the wig, the fake wig.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you see it blow off, and you're like, okay, we can't do this.
Yeah, you're just like, you know what? I can't do it.
I want credits on that. No, I'm just joking. I look forward to that getting made.
Yeah, I know. I'm a marketing firm. Anyway.
That is very cool. And I like the healing aspect. You mentioned something.
Yeah, it has to have something like that. There's no point in like reliving the past if
your twist and
yeah, you want to figure out. Yeah, the whole point of this is like it all turned out fine. It's all going to be okay. You know, you're just like tortured, and if you let that torture, if you don't work on yourself and you don't change and you don't evolve, people get stuck in that torture for their whole life.
Yep.
You know, so I don't want it to just be about just like rolling around in the past and resentment. It's like, no, so what's the lesson here? You know, that she was suffering just as much as I was, that she was, you know, there's so many that, I mean, we know this too. I know this too, as I get more access to really stunningly beautiful, famous women. They have no difference in their brain in a lot of ways than I do. I mean, it's hard to believe, but it's true. You know, people are people, and trauma is trauma, and your past is your past. And I don't care if you have if you're like considered one of the most beautiful people on the planet and you have millions and millions of dollars, you can have the same insecurities.
Agreed.
You know?
I always got like triggered. I don't even know why, but before I did this podcast and you'd hear like an athlete talk about mental health and the comments, this is like 10 years ago, but I'm sure it still happens. Why do they care? They're earning like $100 million.
Right.
Like, what does that have to do?
No, it's truly stunning how people, I mean, look, it's not their fault. We're being fed constantly this message from every part of capitalist society that is the dream, right? If you have the money. I mean, I will tell you, like, my lowest point of my sort of mental health in sort of post, there's two points. So there's more when I don't talk about it, like, it's fine. I always have a weird thing talking about it, like, because I don't want to make a big thing out of it. But I did quit drinking when I was 24. So that's like the first big shift that took place. But then later in life, when I was going through divorce, I was like on a sitcom and I was dating a really, really successful person. And I had more money than I'd ever had. And I had more power than I'd ever had. I had more prestige than I'd ever had. And I was a mess. And I always say it was like the best lesson that I ever kind of got, because I even got sober, by the way, on ambition. I was like, oh, I was screwing up auditions. I was messing up opportunities. So it was like, if I'm going to do this, I have to just quit drinking. Because I really want this. Well, then I got all of it. And then it was like, oh, that's not actually the problem here. Like, the problem is like deeply internal, right? Like, I have to do some really hardcore work on like, what are my priorities and what do I want in life and blah, 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 blah. So it was almost like the greatest gift I could get is to actually see the truth of that, because I think the rest of the world goes, oh, easy. Yeah. You say if you had money, you wouldn't be happy, but like, and then I was like, no, the whole thing happened. I got the lead on the sitcom. I had the money. I got the thing I wanted. And I was kind of, I don't want to say never as unhappy, but I would say never as disordered mentally as I was in that moment in my life, you know. And there was a deep depression that came from getting what you wanted and realizing that that was not the thing that was going to make you happy. It is an extraordinary experience that I kind of wish on everyone in some way.
This is why I love doing the podcast, is when we have people like you speak about these topics, because it's so important. And we've had quite a few guests talk about this, so nothing to be, I know you were trying to like shy around at the start. It's so important. Everyone has these experiences. One example springs to mind. I can literally recite every single guest that this one guest, he was so driven and so passionate that I think he kind of like put away his friends and stuff to the side, and he had the number one goal was to be the star of the show. And he gave this beautiful analogy where he's at the top floor of this amazing apartment. I think it's like the 17th floor. He's overlooking this amazing view, and he said it was empty because he had no one to share it with. He'd kind of like thrown away his life in a sense. He thought this is what he wanted, but it wasn't. And it made him reevaluate every aspect of his life, his relationships, his mental health, I assume his physical health. And he, as like you said, it was the greatest gift. Very, very, very tough, but the greatest gift.
No, I think especially in a world where we're so told we should have more, want more, there is something about actually getting it that at least you learn that lesson. I think if you never get it, you always think, no, that was the thing. That's what would have made me happy. And when you actually do get it, you're like, oh, wait a second. I have to completely rearrange, my priorities. And it is, it's not just it's like, not just that you don't want to be alone. You have to have quality in the relationships that you're in. It's like, you also have to make big choices about who you are going to permit in your life and how you are going to protect that, like that your connections, if everything is, which is, my conclusion was like, oh, everything's about my personal connections to myself and to the other people and living things. It's not about money. It's not about fame. It's not about fortune. It's not status. It's not all these things. It's not youth. It's not all these things that everyone says, but there's also got to be a quality there. It can't just be, oh, and I'm in a shitty relationship and that's okay. You also have to have the courage to make sure that you are in good friendships, good love relationships, that your relationship with your children is healthy, that your relationship with your family is healthy. And if it's not healthy, then you don't see those people, that you protect yourself. So it's been like part B was like, oh, and I need to make sure that my relationships are really good. Cause I was always willing to take company no matter what. If it was company, I would take it, and especially male company. It was like, if you liked me, I liked you. I didn't even think about whether I liked you. And it had to start like becoming, and I had to, in some ways, before Bradley came, I had to be willing to be alone, which I had not been willing to do. And
that's so crucial.
Yeah, it was and if you're not alone, right? You have friendships, you have your animals, you find ways to feel connected, but I had to be willing to not just jump into romantic stuff just to have companionship. And then the greatest things came because I did that.
Oh, it's very important. Like, I'm just saying, there's no judgment. I'm sure I've done this before, but we can often just jump from relationship, whether it's sexual or not, and we're just carrying on the past trauma and we're not actually dealing with it. But also going through everything you said, these are just a few emotions. You would have had to work on self-worth, which would lead to compassion and empathy, which is what me and everyone on this entire planet needs. That's the cure for the best world possible.
Yeah.
I think that's so amazing. Did you do any program, like an AA program, or did you just...
I've been in AA for almost 30 years, 28 years. I do a ton of AA.
I don't want you to laugh because I've said this many times on this podcast. People that I've never done it, but people that have done AA programs are the best people in the world.
Oh,
They're
that's so
the most
sweet.
compassionate.
That's so sweet.
No, I mean it.
No, it's funny you say that because I also feel that way about LGBT people because I feel like I'm always like, trans people are the best people I've ever met in my life. I think what you're responding to is it's people who have hit a bottom or had hit a struggle and have somehow managed to find themselves through the struggle, right? So they've learned compassion, they've learned self-love, they've fought tooth and nail. I mean, people who actually do it, it's like, yeah, I've had to, I've just found myself through decades of, I've done it all. I've done talk therapy. I've done,
what was the first one?
Somatic experiencing, talk therapy, just like regular.
I heard something very different.
What did you hear?
Cock therapy. And I didn't know how to
Well,
navigate
no
that one.
comment on that.
Yeah.
No,
We've all been
I wouldn't call it therapy. Um, maybe now with my husband. No, it was, but like I started with taking away the one element that was the most sort of destructive because it would override everything else. And then you're left with yourself. And I think that people it's so sweet to hear that, because there's a lot of, I never talk about, like, I'm never on social say anything about AA. I don't want to be like, I don't know. I don't want to jinx it. I'm also like, we're scared of the evil eye, blah, blah, blah. But I also feel like if I'm asked directly, I'm not going to like lie, because it's truly the most important thing that I've ever done. But I think there's a lot of misconception around it. And I think, that it's like culty, or it's depressing, and actually it's, as my husband always describes it, who's not in the program, like the organizing principle of my life. And it sort of is where everything else got to kind of like, none of the things that I did manage to do would have happened if I hadn't not just stopped drinking, but also been encouraged through this structure of community to, connect and to be honest and to look at myself and to be more compassionate and to just try to be a better person, because in being a better person, I won't feel as so much self-loathing. I think you even started by saying like self-worth is kind of at the core of well-being.
Yep, definitely.
And honestly, I think the reason religions are so popular, even though they're also so destructive, is it's basically the idea that like, if you do good things, you're probably going to feel better. It's just kind of like, now what is good to you is not what's good to somebody else. And I think there's a lot of horrible limits put on that by organized religion, but the spiritual principle of like, that if you treat people with love and kindness, you will feel like a higher quality human being and have a better life is pretty simple, and true. Hi, Bubba. All the dogs right now.
Love that. And what I've gathered, and I've spoken about it a fair bit, and it's so important. It's like even I haven't experienced that. I've done other things, but it sounds like everyone needs it because everyone's got their own addictions.
Oh, I always feel bad for people who aren't alcoholics, because I'm like, I wish you had, like, everyone, of course, wouldn't it be amazing if every person had like 100 people at their disposal every day to communicate with and support each other and go through stuff. And that's what we all need. And I do think we need to find the substitution for that now that we are so distanced from each other because of the digital age. And oops, I lost it. Honey, I can't, hold on. I gotta, hold on. Iris! My kid is not helping,
It's very cute. I'm enjoying this.
I need you to take these dogs. But I feel like there needs to be we need to find ways to make our communities more local and more like, there needs to be some,
like a sense of belonging in a good group.
Yeah, I like a church that's not a church, but I don't know what that is. And the reason that AA works so well is because you're sort of doing it to save your life or whatever, so it sort of propels you to go. And unfortunately, I feel like we all need something like to make us do something.
Like a community that empowers us and challenges us. Yeah, I think that's crucial.
You gotta take them. They're just driving me crazy. Can you put them in your room and just like lock the door?
Hello, podcast.
No, good. I have a no sorry rule.
Oh yeah, he has a no sorry rule, but like I told him, that's never gonna happen.
I just going back on what you were saying, I think it's so important also giving you that base, because when I go on my rants, it's like, for example, this is not necessarily go at schools, or we haven't quite had the foundations growing up to deal with emotional trauma or issues or just anything, like even rejection. It's not really taught, well, that I'm aware of at many schools. So when we go into school and we're navigating all these relationships and outside of school, can be a massive hit for the vast majority of us. And we haven't really been taught these things. So when someone goes through AA programs or they go through whatever their healing process is, it really teaches you, it's like therapy on drugs without being on drugs. And it rapidly builds you towards you if the individual wants to do it. And I think, if everyone had an AA program or their equivalent, we would see a lot more compassion and empathy, and the world would be very different.
Yeah.
You mentioned the shamanic aspect. Please tell me about
Wait, you mean my somatic, not
somatic.
shamanic.
Oh, sorry, I heard shamanic.
It's like cock. Uh,
I'm hearing what I want to, I guess.
no, although somatic, I have been to a shaman once, or shamanic practitioner. I don't know if she would qualify as like a true shaman, but I grew up with like a mom who's a Hatha Iyengar yoga teacher and does a lot of like spiritual healing stuff. So in
Cool.
typical childhood way, I rebelled against a lot of that. So it's taken me a long time to like open myself up to that kind of stuff. So I couldn't do the shaman thing much, but I found a somatic healer, which is also sort of, you know, foo-foo-y, whatever the hell kind of, you know, I mean, it's like slightly new agey but is becoming more and more common. And I have to say it was like probably one of the most incredibly helpful modalities of therapy that I've ever done, which was, it's like this kind of therapy where if you're in talk therapy and you're just like talking about trauma and you start crying, you just keep talking, right? And then it's like, okay, and you try to work it through and your brain is working it through. Your brain is like, and then you leave, and it can be very helpful. But I have done a lot of that, and I had found that like my nervous system would get kicked up and then it doesn't get resolved, right? It's just like I end up leaving feeling as anxious as I did when I walked in.
Because you can activate like trauma responses.
Yeah, I'm like reactivating everything over and over. And supposedly there's a lot of healing that comes from that. And I'm sure there was for me, but there was also like, okay, I'm also now 52 and I'm sort of tired of just going through the past. So this new kind that I had, which was like, we talk about the past, but but you work with your body while you're talking. So
I think I've studied this. We call it kinesiology, but I'll see what yours is.
Oh yeah.
I studied it for about 3+ years.
Yeah, where you're dealing with your parasympathetic nervous system and you're trying to like calm yourself and sometimes going back into a memory and reimagining it and and redoing the loop. So there's different modalities in it as a whole, but for me it was like I have always known in my body what I wanted to do deep down, but I have overridden myself often, many times. And there's a thing in AA about, that you have an intuitive thought or action. And I was like, I don't have any intuitive thoughts or actions because I was so like jacked up on anxiety that I couldn't trust my intuition. So with age, with tons of meetings, with tons of therapy, and then bringing in this somatic thing, it was like, oh, I do know the truth. I just have a lot of fears, but there's a truer truth, right? And if I follow that, I'm going to be fine. I'm always going to make better decisions and everything's brilliant. And I'm going to be so much happier. And that's meant turning down things that I would never have thought. I mean, I won't be specific and because, that's not fair, but I've turned down jobs that were literally the fantasy of what I had dreamed my whole life. That would make me way more powerful and famous than I am in this moment because of that breakdown that I had, emotionally about a decade ago, where I was like, oh, that's not the thing. The thing is the health of my relationships with myself and other people. And so I prioritized that. And as much as my ego still kind of looks to those things and it hurts a little when I see someone winning an award or, but I'm also like fully aware. And again, my body is very aware of what the truth is, and my body is perfectly happy and like way better choice for me. But it means letting my ego step aside,
Well,
which is really hard.
Isn't that, to me, that's success, is being like intuitive, recognized, because also the intuition, which is maybe a topic for another time, it is so far above the brain. Like we can't ever really, I know it sounds,
or even I would say below the brain. It's like in here. It's like your heart and your gut,
what I mean is it's all knowing that we can't really rationalize when we have these thoughts. But the best example I give is the stereotypical girls on a date with the guy it went well, but you're just not vibing the guy and you don't know why. And then we don't need to know why, in a sense. Like, who knows if the guy's a serial killer or a better opportunity might present. But I think getting yourself out of stress to honor and recognize one's intuition is success. And you're talking about many other components of, yeah, you're getting this amazing job, but it doesn't feel right. And you talked about family and relationships, which is a huge, well, for me, that's success. And it's so nice that when you've started out, you know, it was potentially about like fortune and fame and being even though you are well recognized, but looking at this whole thing in a different lens, which is incredible. And yeah, I just think that's amazing. It's like a little nice circle when we're talking about high school, what we wanted, and now you're like living the dream. And you
even when I got asked about your podcast, I was like, oh, that is so up my alley. Because I am a huge believer that like failure is the launching pad of wonderful stuff. It has always been. And I have failed over and over and over. I mean, I was thinking about that date situation you just said, and I was like, yeah, and what I would do is I'd be like, something would be screaming at me, this is wrong. And I would spend another year with that person, you know, trying to like shove my screaming intuition away, like, shut up, shut up, shut up, you know, and you just like, you have to there's another phrase in AA, like, to thine own self be true, which is actually Shakespeare, which is such a beautiful, but you have to know who thine self is. Like, you know, it's like, first I have to know who I am if I'm going to be true to myself, which is its whole other journey, you know, and then to know it and honor it, you know, is the key, really.
But also credit to you as well. Like, when you're going through, and every single person on this planet has gone through many things as well, but you seem to have had this like mindset, which, you know, it's very easy to go a different direction and give up in many different ways, but it sounds like you've still been, and I'm sure there's been like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you've been driven to succeed for yourself. What I'm hearing is about internal.
That is like a gift that I don't know where I got it, but yeah, that is definitely true. And I don't consider it like a virtue as much as just like, thank God, because I do know people, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's not like, it's literally like, are you driven to be better, or do you get eaten up by it? And maybe the ambition that I was applying that always drove me to be successful just transferred, but I don't like being uncomfortable. I don't like being miserable. I do have a lot of joy around life, even though I've had plenty of bouts of, you know, depression and anxiety but I also have always wanted to feel good and been willing to like constantly seek help to get to that place. And
that's amazing.
I mean, you're also talking to me like I feel like I'm much more in this period of my life. I just happened to finally break through into like a really healthy relationship. And so it sort of shifted my entire kind of, it was like, I felt like all the work like paid off.
That's a nice full circle.
Yeah.
But and something that, one of the many things that really interested me about you, if I'm saying that correctly, is that, and I've heard you speak in such a positive lens in other podcasts, is that you have mentioned before that it does like come around. And even like career, for example, you mentioned, and I disagree with you on this. You mentioned that your big break came in your 40s, even though I think you had your big breaks as Tomb Raider, or you're working in theater and all of that stuff. And I think that's so important, because most people don't find their thing at 18 or 19. And if they do,
I met my, you know, my last husband, you know, I was 45 when Bradley and I started to date. So that's like, and I know people even older than that have found love. I mean, I do think like I think we should all be blessed not to be late bloomers, because then you don't have to like constantly wish you were back in the past. There's nothing worse to me than haunting. People. Yeah, that's haunting to me. Like, I prefer that it was a big hot mess and that I can like move away.
Well, you found the love of your life, and
yeah, I did.
You spoke
God,
about.
Please don't evil eye me. I'm just looking for wood this entire conversation.
Well, you can do. I do this, but anyway.
What's that?
The infinity symbol. But okay, I won't jinx it, even though it's not possible. It's also really nice to know, because a lot of people change their jobs, or they might not hit the success that they thought they wanted, and they can hit it at inverted commas later age. And there's two examples that spring to mind. Colin Mockery, for example, from Whose Line Is It Anyway? I think he only like hit inverted commas his success late 30s or early 40s. Someone can correct me. I had another comedian who's an Indian guy, CEO of companies, doing really well, and then he wanted to do comedy. So he gave up being a CEO to pursue comedy in his 50s. And it's kind of this narrative that you have to hit it in your early age, which I think that's kind of baloney.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that's done that.
No, and it's so much more fun and interesting, and you don't take it for granted, and it doesn't destroy you as much when you're older because you can handle it. I mean, by the time I actually got really what I wanted, which was transparent, where I had like a role that I got to really play, and the show was like really beloved, and it was like, oh, I know how to be here and enjoy this. I don't take any of this for granted. And then it fell apart in this like epic fail way around the Me Too movement. And I even knew, because of how all my experience, how to ride, as painful as that was, like how to ride that. And I found stuff, by the way, too, like I didn't know I could write at all until I was 40, and it was later than that, like 45. I was going through the divorce. My divorce was very comedic in its
like
quality. My ex-husband was dating a life coach, and I was dating Larry David. So that's just a perfect juxtaposition.
Like, not actually Larry David, but
yes, actually Larry David.
You were dating Larry David?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Never Google search that.
Oh, I told you I don't look at the goss because I know you were in Curb Your Enthusiasm, so maybe I got confused.
Yes. No, I did. Post-divorce, that's who the two partners were. So you had like a really upbeat, positive vibes only life coach, and then you had literally the most famous misanthrope on the planet. And the amount of comedy that was going on with my kid, and just trying to like balance, I did a whole, basically I was doing a movie with Paul Giamatti in New York, and I was on the floor weeping from some email that I got from my ex and his new girlfriend about God knows what. We all get along great now, but this was like rough times, right?
Fresh, yeah.
And he said, you have to write this down. And I was like, he's like, this is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Who's saying this? Is this the life coach or Larry?
No, this is Paul Giamatti.
Oh, sorry.
About this dynamic.
Yeah.
Larry and my kid didn't get along so great because my kid was like, why are you dating that older scary guy? And Iris really loved the pretty happy life coach. And it was just a lot. So Paul, as I'm weeping on the ground, literally on the ground, like, I just remember like my knees are up and I'm on this, I'm just like, he's like, Amy, you got to write this down. This is like the greatest. And so I came home, and serendipitously, a friend of mine was like, hey, Amy, I'm co-teaching a comedy stand-up class, and would you want to come? And I was like, you know what? Sure. I'm going to do something new. I'm getting divorced. My life's crazy. And Larry was like, yes, it'll be fun. Go do it. And I ended up, actually, Larry and I think broke up during this time, like right at this time. But I had his complete approval. I wasn't talking about him specifically, but talking about the dynamic of having like one, the one partner that doesn't get along with the kid and the other one who does, and this whole like bit that I did about, my divorce basically. And it went extremely well. Like it was one of those weird, it was like a performance at the Hollywood Improv. It was the class performance, but it was like a big crowd, and I like dropped the mic. I mean, it was like, I thought I was like, like all of a sudden, I don't know, Sarah Silverman or something. So they taped this class, and I had done a very small part in a movie with Nicole Holofcener called Enough Said. And my friend Julie was at the stand-up, and she said, you should turn this into a TV show and ask Nicole Holofcener, she'll be your executive producer. And I hadn't even booked Transparent yet. I was not like a particularly known entity, although I had done the Coen Brothers movie and I'd been on Kurt and I'd done Louie. And so that was sort of known in the comedy world. But anyway, she said yes. And I ended up selling and writing my first pilot. The day I sold it, I also booked Transparent. So I ended up having, and it was wild. I sold another pilot. Now I've written this screenplay. So like I figured out something from lying on the floor sobbing. And I've told Paul, I was like, you kind of changed my life because I never even tried to write anything in my life. And I didn't, anyway, it was just all from more trauma.
This is just incredible. One, you weren't a writer, and to just write down something traumatic is very hard, and to put pen to paper, but then to go out, you obviously would do serious healing from the writing side as well. But then to show it to people, add in your takes and the comedic flair, to sell it is one thing. And then you get Transparent, which is like the biggest, and there's just, I've heard you talk about it many times about how amazing it is for you also personally as well. What a nice story that you can go through the lowest of lows and then the best things happen. And
you know who actually, this is a hysterical point, is the person who pointed out the possibility of this to me was not a therapist or anyone in AA or my mom. It was my accountant. The year was 2012. I think, if I'm right, yep, a decade. And I was having the worst year financially. I'd been a really big voiceover and the divorce was very expensive for me. And so even though I was dating a billionaire, I wasn't taking any of his money, and I was feeling scared. I was new in LA. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And she said, I have to tell you, Amy, I found with most of my clients, their worst year usually is the precursor to their best.
Interesting.
So it's not just me.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? And then literally in one day, I'm in FX with Nicole pitching this show that I'm going to star in, and called Angry MILF. That was based on my divorce. And they bought it in the room, and I walked out of the room and I got an email from Joey Soloway offering me the part of Sarah Pfefferman. And then it was funny because Nicole's the one who called it, like, eventually you're gonna have to pick one of these, like something's gonna give. So we went into like a development writing deal, waiting to see what was happening with Transparent. And honestly, it all turned out fine because I wasn't really ready. The other thing about timing and stuff, and people are like, yes, you are. This is the thing about knowing yourself too. It's like, I really wasn't ready to write, star, and be in my own show. I wanted to make better things. Better things got made, right? Pamela Adlon was ready, and she was doing what I was thinking of doing, but absolutely in no way ready to do. No way. So, but I got to have a little taste of that and sort of open up something that I'm now exploring. And I was just thinking, when you talked about the businessman who quit, I was like, yeah, I might end up quitting acting. I don't know, and going into just writing and directing. I don't know, because the acting stuff is incredible, but boy, talk about rejection. Like the business of it it's just relentless. It's humiliating.
Well, I've heard so much, and I might be like jumping the gun, but you briefly mentioned that you're on a show. I think it was the Paul Reisner show, and you're playing, was it the wife of Paul Reisner? I know you've done a serious amount of work on yourself, and you continue after this point. But still, you get this enormous break, and it doesn't go ahead after like 2 weeks. And that's just like one of probably 100 stories you've had. Also, the nose.
That was probably the most like profound example of that failure is part of success, because I didn't know. I assumed, this happened to me previously in my theater days. I got a really bad review in a play at the Goodman, and I thought, I'll never be cast at the Goodman again. And I was cast in like the next season because the artistic director's like, we don't care about reviews. And I didn't realize that part of Hollywood, that everybody here has a graveyard of TV shows and pilots. I'd never been on a TV show on that level. I assumed if I was on a sitcom for the first time as a series regular and it failed, I was never going to get another show. But what it actually showed, which I didn't know, was that I was capable of being cast as the lead on a sitcom. That's what the business saw. That's not how I interpreted it. I thought, well, I'm done. And then I was like, oh, everybody here has, so like, even the fact that I've sold scripts and you've never seen them, I didn't know that was a thing. Like, oh, people sell scripts all the time, they don't get made. It's like all part of the process of getting to that point. People have shows that fail, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, I'd never had a show that failed because that was my first one. And it was epic in its failure. It was literally on the air for 2 weeks. And we got called, I think we were having like a Passover dinner actually at my dad's house in Indiana. And Paul Reiser called the cast like after the show aired and said, like, it's been pulled.
That is
like
crushing at the time.
Yeah, it was crushing. It was crushing. And my husband had moved out, that like officially got in his own apartment, my ex-husband. Like, it was a very, very rough time. But yeah, I didn't know that was just the beginning of actually having an on-camera career, really, that was consistent. You have COVID? What's going on over there?
I recently had COVID. I think this is just a
You
cold.
did? Oh.
I was completely fine. No issue.
Oh, that's good.
I love your like positive outlook, and I just think it's like contagious in a sense. Like, you know, you've spoken about many things that haven't gone necessarily to the plan, but then how you ended with, it was like the best experience of my life. And that's a huge credit to you and the work that you've done on yourself. I think it's really important. And it's also like,
Thank you.
I learned very early on, and I brought this up a few times, that we can, like, me and a friend can see an experience and one can say that was the worst experience ever. And I can go, that was amazing. And it's really a matter of, and it's a lot easier said than done, of perception.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I know that, yeah, I could just ramble on, but
No,
I think it's
absolutely. No, I always say that. I mean, I want to find the upside, you know, and that is a huge gift. And whether you need to change your mind, you know, through, you know, I mean, I've taken a lot of different avenues to find positive thinking. I want to be like clear too, like when I did quit drinking, I was, you know, done with being on the planet. So I know what it is to be really, really dark. So it's not like, hopefully it doesn't feel Pollyanna or whatever, like, everything's great. I was never like, everything's great. But I did always I do feel like I just want to feel better. So I even studied philosophy in college, and there's certain philosophies where it's like, oh, you believe in God because maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but at least if there is, you're going to heaven. Like there's some logic to that kind of thinking where it's like, look, I don't know, but like, what are my two choices here? To believe that I'm getting fucked 24/7, or to like believe, and I do feel like with age, you know, I mean, I just recently had one of those other experiences where I was in a movie called I Love My Dad, and it was going to be at South by Southwest, and I really wanted to go, and they really wanted me to go. I had really bonded with the producers and with the guy who's, you know, plays my son and who wrote it and directed it. Like, you have to come. It won't be the same without you. You have to come. And I'm like, I have to go. And I was working on Handmaid's Tale in Toronto, and there's quarantine stuff and travel requirements, and it just wasn't working. And I tried everything, and I was so pissed. I mean, I was just like, God, why can't I go? Like, I was very attached to how fun it would be there. I'd never been. I'd been in a movie the year before that won, and I didn't get to go because of COVID, and I've always wanted to go, and, you know, FOMO. And then, you know, was like, okay, I'll go on the back end. And I got sick, and I couldn't even go to the closing screening, and it won the festival, and it won the audience award, and it won the jury award. And I was like, ah. And then, you know, 2 months later, James, who made the movie, goes, oh, it's also premiering at the Chicago Film Festival, which happened to be the weekend of my 35th high school reunion that I was already going to. And I was like, oh, so I end up going to this massive sold out screening with half of my hometown. You know, I'm a longtime Chicagoan, so I have 20 friends and family there, sitting next to my father, watching a movie called I Love My Dad, and going, oh, well, this is so much better. And this is the first time I'd seen the movie, and the audience went insane. Oh. And it was like, and I was like, oh, this is so much better than what I was trying to ram down the throat of my idea of what, and it's a stupid example, and there's people dying of cancer.
No,
I'm not trying to
that's
say
a
like,
example.
but this is how I interpret, this is how I try to, I love that when things do resolve on the other end, and sometimes that takes a long time, Like I've had years where there's not a resolve and I'm just in the hallway and I hate everything. But when they eventually resolve and you go, oh, that's so much better than it's
What
like
you're
the best
feeling.
feeling in the world because you
Yep.
can let go of the past and your regrets, you know?
It's a nice full circle.
Did you interview Lila Robbins? Am I remembering that
Yes.
correctly? Okay. You want to know one of the craziest stories ever?
She didn't bring this up, but I've
Do you
heard you
know
talk
it?
about this. Yes.
Yes. Well, why would she bring it up? Because it wasn't for her. Like,
Yeah.
but I understudied her as Blanche Dubois at Steppenwolf Theater when I was 27, and she was the lead of this big, huge local production, and I was non-equity. I'd never done a play at Steppenwolf. I don't know how I got the job, although I guess they were looking for non-union actors who were good enough to play those kinds of parts. And I guess they thought I was, and I I was trying so hard to get off book because she was losing her voice in previews. And we knew, and at any point she might not be able to go on. And this is a 3.5-hour play. And unlike the movie, it really is all Blanche. It's not a lot. I mean, it's Stanley and everyone else in it is like, obviously important, but it is she's in almost every scene for 3.5 hours.
Wow.
And I never really got to know Lila very much, but she lost her voice she went on steroids. I went into was told I might go up at any day that week. I ran my car into the back of 2 other cars trying to memorize lines, so I stopped driving. And I had this huge zit on the side of my face from stress, such an epic pimple that 10 years later, someone remembered it. It was like a cyst. It was like I had a tumor on the side of my face. And I went in for a fight call because she might not be able to do 2 shows on a Sunday. And I had huge sweat marks. I mean, I don't even know how I pulled this off at all. And in between the 2 shows, they said you need to be ready to go on for the second show. She probably can't do the second show.
Wow.
And instead of watching the play, I went into this weird nap mode where I just lied on an equity cot and listened to it through the speaker. And then I woke up and they're like, you're on. And I had to go to Blanche Dubois Steppenwolf. And it was just I've never walked through that much fear in my life. I really lucked out that Blanche is probably more afraid than anyone in the world. So everything I was feeling, I could just put into her. But what was so funny to me is that so many of the jokes about Blanche are how old she is. And I literally was only 27, but because I'm on stage and I'm wearing a wig and everyone, no one cared. They were still laughing at the jokes. And I was just I remember thinking inside, but I am only 27. But yeah. And then the newspaper said that a star was born, that the understudy had gone on. And then literally nothing happened for a decade, nothing.
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, nothing. And I was I'm arrived. I've played Blanche Dubois at Steppenwolf Theater. And then it was crickets for a decade. So I don't know.
But isn't that interesting? You got the bad review and then you got this
Yes,
amazing review.
that's true. You know what? Do you know that I've never even put that in my head that was true, that I got a good review ever? I only remember that shitty review. I remember what they said. They were the Wall Street Journal said, Amy Landecker doesn't have enough passion to incite a PTA coffee.
I don't even know what that means.
I was trying to incite a revolution or something. And it was basically I have no passion. And I was also the love interest. It was called Zoot Suit. But yeah, no, you're right. And it's funny though, the brain always wants to go back to the shitty one.
But at the same time, I've heard some examples of this. You just can't, it's a review. It's someone's opinion. You may have done a genuinely terrible job and they said you were the best thing. You can't go with it, but it's nice that you got the star as a pawn.
Yeah, that was the dream one. But then it really messed with my head because I was expecting something to happen. And then it was she came back, and I always described it as feeling I'd put my fist in a Jello bowl and you take it out and it's you were never there. I'd saved the day. Everybody, I was getting standing ovation. It was it was even funny that the standing ovation though, I reverted to being myself, and my sister was there and I was sit down. I was embarrassed. She's it was so funny. You did this whole play and then you just became you're kid. And then I was just sort of like, I mean, the same thing happened with Serious Man, which was like another big moment where something big happened. And I thought, well, I've arrived. Okay, so this is the thing. It was funny because when I was in Transparent, a producer came up to me and said, you know how you're always like, think that this is the thing and it's never the thing? She's like, this is the thing.
Oh, wow.
And she was right. It was the thing.
That is adorable. And I could just like, maybe you can get Layla Robbins in the script that you were talking about earlier, and you can be like the nemesis with her. You stole her thunder.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea.
So what we're going to do is do a very quick rapid fire segment to wrap up the podcast. So the first thing that springs to mind, but you can take your time. Well, actually, I'll start with this one. Who do you get most mistaken for?
Amy Brenneman, who just got a part I really wanted. So people are going to be congratulating me on it, by the way.
And it's nice.
And I'm going to be like, wasn't
both
me.
Amy's, yeah. You basically answered this, but if you could go back into a time when you were first starting out, what advice would you give yourself and why?
I would just tell myself to stop overriding, to listen. Although, it's true too, like after this conversation, it's like, yeah, but then I changed it's like Ray Bradbury has that short story about like the butterfly effect. Like if you get off what happens? So if I change something, I don't get to be here. So I guess I would say, do nothing. Keep doing what you're doing, kid. You're doing great.
That's amazing. I know we could speak about this for ages, but Leslie Kahn.
Yeah.
I heard you talk about, she's an acting teacher, but she brought back the fun for you. So how did she do that?
She told me to get on Prozac. That helped. Literally the first time I met her, she's like, you need to be on an antidepressant, which I thought was hysterical.
First thing she says.
It was really helpful. No, but and then she just has this whole thing, dare to suck. She has this whole thing about like,
sounds like Brené Brown.
Dare to be terrible. Yeah. It's like dare to just, she just was like, forget trying to do it right and try to enjoy the process. And it was something, I felt like every audition was like, what do they want? Right? Like, what do they want? And there was something about figuring out what would be fun for me to do that changed everything for me. It was just like, it's a tough thing as an actor because you so want to please. And there is this kind of like outline of like what you're supposed to do, but often they want you to show them what it is, and so she was really great about encouraging me to do that.
It's also important, even outside of acting, just life advice as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What are you most proud of? And I'm probably going to ask a part B of that.
I mean, what always comes to my mind, and I hate to sound so cliche, is like being sober, because I think we live in a really heavily drinking world, and I really like to fit in, and I really like to please people. So the idea that I've done something that goes against what every social event tells me is kind of mind-blowing.
Nice.
But
I also don't drink, so credit.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, fun.
Not many people say.
It's very rare.
Yeah.
Because it's rare. I mean, I just worked with like a Muslim actor who has never had a drink in his life, and I was like, oh yeah, there's like all types of people who don't drink that aren't just like. Yeah. But I don't. That's not what the world tells us. And I mean, I have a joke with my husband because he quit smoking with hypnosis. And his hypnotist said, like, you don't need like a 12-step program. I can like fix like addiction issues with hypnosis. And I said, yeah, but the difference is like you leave hypnosis and the entire world supports you in your decision to not smoke. You're not even allowed to smoke in most places. People are always like, well done. Whereas imagine if you were trying to quit smoking and it was like your favorite thing, but it was very destructive. And every time you went anywhere, everyone with you was smoking. There was a wall of cigarettes and they brought a box to you and said like, are you sure you don't want to try just one? These are the best cigarettes you've ever had. You would eventually find yourself you'd give in unless you had this full kind of wherewithal, which I'm just surprised that I've had. To not give in. But the other thing I'm most proud of is my kid, because I have an amazing child who's,
the one I just met.
Yeah, Iris, who's a they them, which is also an interesting path for me as a people pleaser and as wanting to. And I've just like found the universe has often given me things that have set my experience a little bit aside from the norm, and they've actually been like the most enriching parts of my life. So I have this
Oh,
very
beautiful.
bright, non-partying, non-idiotic, like I was teenager, who's like a social justice warrior and like lives very much in their truth and doesn't try to please everybody. And that's taught me a lot, and I feel really grateful for them.
Oh, I love the word grateful.
Mhm.
Oh, we can talk about that. We're doing a part 2. Last question. Oh, actually, last 2. What advice would you like to give someone who wants to try something different on you, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
I think I would say, as much as we can always remember that nothing really matters, really, nothing, we are like a blip, that don't worry about what anyone thinks. It's way easier said than done. But I think what stops me all the time is like fear of judgment and people's opinions. And it doesn't matter. It's like, we're all going to die. This is all meaningless or meaningful. It just depends on who can even begin to understand the mysteries of the universe? So what difference does it make if I want to like do a stand-up or not? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not that important. So try to like do the Buddhist thing. It's not important, detach, and you're dying today. What would you do?
Beautiful. You should do a TED talk in yours as well. Last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Oh God.
The hardest one.
I don't know. I thought you were wonderful.
Thank you.
I
Thought in
don't
past
know.
tense or
You
current
should
tense?
have, my self-deprecating part of me wants to say, you should have not asked me to do this. What's wrong with you?
You're not allowed to make me laugh with my cough. Is there anything that springs to mind? Anything you wanted to tie up?
No. I guess I just want to make sure I'm like, look, I'm in a good place today. On another day, it could be a different thing. And just hang in there no matter what, because it's going to change. You know what I mean? Like, if I heard me, I'd be like, well, yeah, easy for you, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I just want to say, like, that doesn't mean I don't have really bad days, So that's just being alive.
I think that you've given so many tools. I can literally write an essay about you, but I'll keep it short. You've given so many tools and examples and practical examples, and you've kind of spoken about the human experience in such a short time as well. And we all go through various things, but also hearing how you've overcome challenge after challenge doesn't mean, as you say, we don't have our bad days, but your willingness and desire to grow. And, you talk about the internals, and I think that's something we can all take from. Before we go, how can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
Well, I am on Instagram. It's like the only social I do. It's Amy Landecker. But I also, to be truthful too, I don't tend to get very personal on there. I don't really feel like it's a great medium for deep communication. I keep it pretty light. I like this. I like talking. And so I would say, if you want to follow anything that I really feel, probably listen to this and look at, hopefully see something I wrote one day. That'll be where I put most of my thoughts. But social, and I'm in a bunch of stuff. Not that anyone cares, but
no, they
want
do.
to see me.
They want to see,
you want to see me act. I'm in starting season 2 of Your Honor, and I'm on a show called MINX here in the States. That's really fun on HBO Max, and highly recommend that. And I'm a little bit on GASLIT. There's a bunch of stuff, but I would say MINX and Your Honor are probably my biggest on-camera jobs at the moment that are worth.
That is very cool. Everyone check it out. And you are amazing. I've already given you my rant, but you're brilliant, and I really appreciate you coming on.
It was really nice talking to you. I'm going to follow you.
I really like how Amy expresses that all challenges are really blessings in disguise, but it may be with fullness of time that we're able to understand the learnings from our experience. As we outlined, an experience can be either good or bad depending on one's viewpoint. Amy has this brilliant and resilient mentality in life where she acknowledges how regardless of what you're going through, it will get better. She gives tangible solutions to one's struggles, such as finding the right therapies, community, hobbies and passions, family and friends. She truly is an inspiration and is able to demonstrate that hard work actually pays off. Also, I love hearing how her life is so much better, in inverted commas, later in life. It's just so encouraging knowing that life can and will get better. So I'll leave you with this amazing quote by Dolly Parton. The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain.
Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.